Three influential Muslim-majority countries. Pakistan, with nuclear capabilities and one of the largest standing militaries in the world. Saudi Arabia, with vast economic resources, advanced military procurement, and the presence of Islam's two holiest sites. And Turkey, with one of NATO's most capable armed forces, advanced drone technology, modern fighter aircraft, missile systems, and a large, well-trained military force. Individually, each holds significant regional and strategic power. Together they appear formidable. But one key question changes the entire perspective. What is the purpose of bringing these three countries together? Are they preparing for a potential confrontation with Israel? Are they positioning themselves against Iran, the Houthis in Yemen, or Shia-aligned armed groups in Iraq? Or is there a broader, more complex strategic calculation unfolding behind the scenes? Because while the United States and Israel continue to face the high costs of regional tensions involving Iran, a new alignment is beginning to take shape. And notably, its discussions were not held in Washington, not in Ankara, not in Riyadh. They were held in Mecca, the holiest city in Islam. But why Mecca? Why now? And most importantly, is it realistically possible for these three countries to form a coalition strong enough to counter Iran and its regional allies without direct US military support? Or is this simply a strategic partnership that exists more in principle than in practice? Today, we will examine the origins and implications of this emerging alignment. Let us begin. Before we begin, we need to understand the situation in these three countries, as well as their own alliances and coalitions. We also need to understand whether any of these countries is facing a special situation or a particular challenge within its own borders. But before we get into that, we need to understand the broader situation in the Middle East. What happened to the United States coalition in the region? And what kind of power does it still have? First, we need to understand what happened to the US air bases in the Middle East. During this war between Iran and the United States, we have witnessed one of the most difficult situations ever faced by US air bases in the region. Can you believe it if I tell you that there is no longer a truly secure US air base in the Middle East? From Kuwait and Bahrain to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, US military bases have faced serious threats. There are also some air bases in Saudi Arabia and Jordan, but in other countries, these bases have become increasingly difficult places to operate from. Endless drones and missiles coming from Iran have been falling on them like rain. So, Arab countries are beginning to lose confidence in what was once their greatest security coalition, the United States. Some of them have started building closer relations with Iran, as Oman has done. Others have begun looking for alternative alliances because US military bases have increasingly come under threat. And before we leave this part, we need to understand which countries could potentially build such a coalition. Could the Arab countries create a coalition of their own? And could they actually build something comparable to the coalition led by the United States? Despite all of this, Arab countries are facing another serious challenge from Shia armed groups. In Iraq, there are Shia groups that, according to some assessments, could potentially threaten Kuwait. Can you imagine if I told you that Shia groups operating in Iraq could potentially reach Kuwait in a matter of days, weeks, or months? In an extreme scenario, it could happen even faster. So, Arab countries have begun searching for another coalition to defend their countries because they believe they cannot defend themselves alone against these groups. That is the basic understanding of the situation in this region. So let's move on to the next part, where we will look at the situation of these three countries. First, let's begin with Pakistan. Pakistan is a very powerful country in Asia. It has some of the most powerful fighter jets, it has nuclear weapons, a population of around 250 million people and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. We can say that Pakistan is a very powerful country. But Pakistan is also facing something that many people overlook: economic problems. If the United States stops the financial support it provides to Pakistan, and if the Arab countries stop their support as well, we can say that Pakistan could face severe economic consequences. It would struggle to survive. It is facing one of the most difficult economic situations in its history. And also, the military administration in Pakistan is pushing and forcing its own people. You can't speak freely in Pakistan about the administration. There are serious restrictions, and political freedom is limited. Pakistan is also one of the greatest allies of the United States. We could say that it is heavily dependent on the US. They cannot easily do anything that goes against US strategy or plans. That's the situation in Pakistan. Let's move on to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a powerful country in the Islamic world. It is also home to the most sacred places in Islam, the Prophet's Mosque in Medina and the Kaaba in Mecca. Muslims around the world look toward this country, but Saudi Arabia decided to turn toward the United States and become one of its greatest allies. And sadly, this country also faces criticism for restricting and controlling its own people. You can't freely speak about certain issues concerning the administration, but why are Pakistan and Saudi Arabia similar when it comes to restricting and controlling their own people? We don't know. They have military power, but they have struggled to fight the Houthis, the rebel group operating in Yemen. Yemen is a mountainous country, and fighting such a group there is extremely difficult. And let's move on to Turkey. Turkey is a very powerful country. It has the second largest military in NATO after the United States. It has advanced technology, drones, fighter jets, missiles, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. But Turkey is also facing another difficult period. Its economy depends heavily on its relationships with Western countries, while its own currency has been suffering from severe inflation. So, if I summarize all of this, these three countries have significant relationships with the United States and face serious challenges of their own. If the United States were to stop its financial support to Pakistan, Pakistan would face enormous difficulties. If the United States were to end its strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia would face major consequences. And if the United States were to end its strategic partnership with Turkey, Turkey would also face serious challenges. None of these countries can simply ignore the United States or walk away from its influence without facing major consequences. And now, let's move on to the aim and purpose of this coalition. If you try to understand it, you might get confused because they are not fighting Israel, they are not fighting Iran, they are not fighting the Houthis, and they are not fighting the Shia groups operating in Iraq. So, what was the purpose of creating this coalition? What was behind the creation of this coalition is something strange. The United States and Israel tried to end the war with Iran, but they decided to create another coalition that could potentially continue the fight against Iran, because the United States faced a harsh and extremely difficult situation during this war. The US stockpile of missiles was getting close to being depleted, while Israel could not continue fighting Iran indefinitely because the Israeli population could not remain in shelters for months and months. So Israel had already stopped the war. Then the United States continued. But when the US realized that the war would never come to an end and that Iran's government was not going to change, they decided to stop. And they did. So Trump and his administration are trying to create another coalition that could fight Iran while the United States takes a step back. But the question is, can they actually fight Iran? Can they really stand against Iran without the United States leading the fight? You will find out the answers to all of these questions toward the end of this video. The objective of this coalition is to reopen the Bab al-Mandab Strait, as the Saudi government is currently unable to export oil or gas through this critical route. The Houthis have exerted significant pressure on Saudi Arabia in response to its actions in Yemen, and Saudi Arabia is not in a position to confront the Houthis alone. As a result, they are seeking an alternative solution. Previously, 14 countries were involved in securing the Bab al-Mandab Strait, but all of them ultimately failed. Now, a new and more powerful coalition is being pursued. However, shortly after its formation, the Houthis launched strikes on Saudi Arabian oil facilities. In response, the coalition did not issue any formal statement or call for de-escalation. Instead, it remained passive. This raises an important question. Why is the coalition unable to take action against the Houthis? We will examine these questions in the next section. Let us now turn to the decision to hold the meeting in Mecca. If Muslim-majority countries begin to overlook the significance of religion and move away from it, they risk losing an essential foundation of their identity. Today, there appears to be a renewed recognition that there is no more meaningful place to return to than their faith, and many are re-engaging with it. The intention was to emphasize that this was a meeting held in Mecca, the Holy Land. However, whether this initiative will succeed or fail remains to be seen. The outcome will become clearer in the coming days. Thank you for watching this video.